today we will start discussing about another aspect of the heritage and preservation, that's historic cities and heritage areas. So far we have been discussing mainly about individual structures, monuments and so forth, their maintenance, repair, decay, other thing. And this is a part which encompasses a larger area. Let us talk about, let us say as an example, the Red Fort in Delhi, which is a World Heritage Site. We know in its close vicinity also a Jama Masjid and also Fatehpuri Mosque is there. But when we see the city of Delhi before the siege in 1858, we see is not only the Jama Masjid and Red Fort, which you can clearly see here, and the Jama Masjid, there is a fort, and so there is a boundary which is there, and this is the monuments what we see here, this is the Jama Masjid. But what is important is that there is also a spine which is the commercial spine and a larger area, residential and commercial area, which comprise this what we call Shahjahanabad or Old City. This monument cannot exist in isolation, it has to have, and it did have, a very intricate township and very strong living heritage areas. Chandni Chowk, which is beautiful buildings, it is not a monument, but a group of buildings, which is a picture from 1858, and this is that spine which I have talked about. This is what is Chandni Chowk today, 2015. It has changed a lot. Red Fort is there, Jama Masjid is there, some of these structures are also there, but when we talk about or think about Old Delhi or Shahjahanabad, we think about the crowding, congestion, lack of infrastructure, but still it is a very vibrant area, and still we can find these beautiful structures, the Mughal era architecture in Old Delhi, which are residential structures still there. So that is what is in historic area. It is not only monuments, there are other things, other lesser structures, beautiful structure, activities, infrastructure, lived in areas. And this is what we call the historic area and heritage district, and we can't talk about monuments in isolation of that area. So that we have talked about Old Delhi, where we see a monument, and also the commercial districts or the heritage areas, but there are many other examples like that. This is the Bhadra Fort in Ahmedabad, which is actually the nucleus, the genesis of Ahmedabad, which is the old city of Ahmedabad. And we also see that there are various neighborhoods which are the wooden structures, which recently has been declared as a World Heritage City, and these two are complementary to each other. This is a case of Fort Kochi, Mutton Cherry, and also there is the synagogue and the old town. So, these together in each and every case comprise what is the heritage district. Let us take another example which is not in India, but Florence in Italy. This is the area where there are churches, very historic structures, monument, but also there are lesser historically significant. There are a group of buildings which comprise and which talks about the layers of history that this area has passed through. And this area are very much lived in city, they are preserved, yes, but also there are new buildings which are coming up, because it is changing, but not abruptly, but slowly and in harmony with the structure, with the pattern, with the activities are also changing. So, let us see that since when we have been talking about this historic area and urban district as a definite policy guidelines. It started of the World War, Second World War, after the destruction of many of the cities in Europe in the World War II, and you can see the London that some of the structures are there, and there is a lot of demolition and destruction which happened due to the war. And primary objective in 1940s and 1950s was the reconstruction of this area. Many of the European cities started reconstructing or new development in the old areas, but many of these cities went back in reconstructing that area, keeping the historic fabric. We have seen Warsaw, that is a very unique example, but there are many other examples. So, there was a realization that it's not only the monuments we should talk about, it is the monument is a part of a larger area or historic fabric, and various initiatives at the national level for protection of historic urban areas happened since that time. We remember the 1964 Venice Charter, which was talking about the certain guidelines and the principles of the conservation of the individual structures. The major objective of Venice Charter was that what? To promote legislation for safeguarding historic center. It was already there, this concept of historic center, which should keep in view the necessity both of safeguarding and improving these historic centers and integrating them with contemporary life. So, let us see what it is talking about. It is talking about the safeguarding the historic center. So, safeguarding, we must keep in mind that it is trying to keep that, but also what is talking about is the improving this historic center and also integrating them with the contemporary life. So, these are very important points, that how to integrate them in the contemporary life, the historic fabric, because if it is to be a lived in city, not a museum city, how do we integrate that? How do you keep the relationship of the monuments and the historic fabric which is surrounding the monuments? There may be one monument, several monuments, and the open spaces, the street pattern, activities. There are a lot which can be talked about. So, this become one of the, this was already there in the Venice Charter. There are many examples all over the world where the historic areas, historic cities are lived in. Itsukushima in Japan, you remember that shrine with what we saw in the, that the water on the sea, the shrine which the water recedes and in the evening, and then in the morning it sort of half submerged. So, that is the town of where it is a very much lived and all the activities are happening, but it has been able to maintain the historic fabric and the significance or the value and identity, most important, of the historic fabric. But what are the ways to do that? How to ensure that it is preserved? How to ensure that the historic fabric is the significance and identity is maintained, but still it becomes a lived in city, because there will be the changes to suit it to the contemporary needs, and these are really the challenges. So, what happened that during the period of 70s, there was a realization that we have to change from the monument centric conservation to context of the larger area, the setting and the context, and what is that context. So, there are several charters which started developing, especially in the period of 1970s. First, the World Heritage Convention in 1972, the International Recommendation Concerning Historic Area 1976 of UNESCO. So, and Council of Europe's Amsterdam Declaration in 1975. These are all policy documents which is broadening the concept of what is urban heritage and is integrated conservation. So, this question of integrated conservation, integrating monuments with the surrounding area, integrating the physical structure with the social economic structure and the political system, integrating a small area which is larger domain, and integrating the past, present and the future. This became a challenge. So, during 70s we saw that all these conventions started, we started addressing the concern issues, policies for this larger context of the monuments and talking about the historic areas. Now, let us see 1972 World Heritage Convention, what it talked about. It talked about historic urban areas and the notion of a group of buildings. Not only it has to be a city, it can be a part, it can be a spine where there is a group of buildings which independently may not have a lot of significance, but when as a group they contribute to the significance historically, aesthetically, urban design, townscape value. So, 1972 World Heritage Convention talked about the historic urban areas and the group of buildings. 1975, the Congress of European Architectural Heritage, they talked about the European Charter of the Architectural Heritage, and in that they talked about the attention to problems faced by the group of lesser buildings in our old towns and characteristic villages in their natural and man-made setting. So, please note that they are talking about the groups of lesser buildings in our old towns, but it's also talking about not only the urban areas, talking about the characteristic villages in their natural and man-made setting. So, it is shifted also its focus from the, it is not shifted, it has expanded its focus also to the rural areas, which are also getting threatened because of the urban expansion and others. So, it is talking about the groups of lesser building both in the historic areas and also in the characteristic villages in the urban settings. But if you are not talking about the museum city, we are not talking about the freezing the cities like Williamsburg, that some of the examples are like that, but we are talking about the lived in cities, lived in historic areas and urban core as a part of a larger city or the villages. Now, to do that, it is not only important to talk about the technicalities of the preservation, conservation or the fabric preservation, it also has to take in account the legal, the administrative, financial, technical support based on the cooperation of the stakeholders. We have to understand that when you are talking about a larger area, we are talking about the private owners or multiple stakeholders. We are not talking about sort of taking these buildings under the government. We are talking about the buildings which will remain with the stakeholders and the private ownership, and also sometimes the public and other trust and other things, but these are the stakeholders who have to be brought into the decision making process right from the beginning. So, the cooperation of the stakeholders is very much in, and it also public and the private, and we need to understand the implication in legal, administrative, financial and technical support what is required. 1972 World Heritage Convention. So, it talked about the historic urban area group of buildings, we have already seen that, but it also talked about, as we have already discussed, the group of lesser building and characteristic villages. Let us see some of the examples. For example, historic urban areas, York. York is an historic urban area, we have discussed York. York Minster is one of the very important part of this, and then there are the buildings which are there. Now, this building, as you can see, it's a layer of building. There are the timber building, the brick buildings, the modern buildings which have come up, but they have developed in harmony, keeping the essential characteristics of the historic fabric and keeping its identity, but is changing slowly in harmony, but not drastically, not in an ad hoc manner. So, this is what we call the historic urban areas. The group of buildings. This is an example in a group of building in Isle of Wight in UK, where there is no monument. In the case of York, there is a monument, and one monument and a few churches are there, a lot of churches are there. York Minster is very predominant, but there are areas where there is no monument. There can be just group of buildings like Isle of Wight, and which is now a tourist area, and there are a group of lesser building of the different style, different characteristics from the different ages. So, this can be another type of historic urban area. The third category, the group of lesser building in old town and characteristic villages in the natural or man-made setting. So, this is example from the same area where there are the group of urban, the rural characteristics, sloping roof with the tile roofs and other, which also have been preserved because they are a different characteristic. So, these are the major types, there can be some other variation. These are the major types which the World Heritage Convention started talking about. As we say that there also the integrated conservation which came that time, the concept of the integrated conservation, it was there. It was there even in the during the earlier period also there, but as a sort of a concept, the terminology of the integrated conservation, that is integrating the social fabric, the people, they became sort of formalized during this Declaration of Amsterdam in 1975. So, what it did, it formally sort of started launching the policies of integrated conservation, stressing the responsibility of the local authorities and citizens' participation in such initiative. As I told you that it is this type of concept and planning and policy is not possible without the involvement of the local authorities and the citizens and this participation of the stakeholders. Again, it emphasizes the role of planning, education, legal and administrative measures in protecting the region's architectural heritage. Architectural conservation must become an integral part of urban and regional planning, because otherwise if you do not talk about the larger context of the region and the larger city, it will really become a sort of an isolated island, and that is what is not desirable, because it has to become a part of a larger area. And we have to also redefine the role. It is something like that. Suppose there is an old lady in a family, the grandmother, she is looked after very well with medicine and care and protection, other things, proper food, health and other. But because she is not so active as like her younger age, she cannot take part in the physical activity, physical role. So, she is looked after well, but she will not mentally be happy until and unless the family members involve her in the everyday activities, maybe taking advice from her, maybe because her role also has changed, she is not so physically active, but she has the knowledge. So, that can be imparted to the younger generation, she can tell the story, we can look up to her for advice, and then only she will mentally be happy. So, her role has been redefined, and that exactly with the historic urban core. Probably it was a defense area, probably it was a fort or a palace, it is no longer there. But what we have to do is that we have to redefine the role of that historic area, that how it is integrating with the larger master plan, the future policies of that larger area, that is there. So, it is not only taking care of the fabric or preserving it well, we have to find a new role for the historic city, and that is very important. So, and that is what is the underlying concept of the integrated conservation. So, the integrated conservation has to involve the local authorities and citizens again and again, but what is important is that the social factor. It has changed, sort of expanded its focus from the physical factors to much more broader things, the social, economic activities and other factors. And this is a very important concept which was there formally into the Declaration of Amsterdam. It became more people centric. So, we continue with that it needs the new legislative measure, because if we have to talk about taking care of that area and to make it sort of continue and have its new role defined, we have to have the new legislation and administrative measure. It cannot be at par with the larger area and the new development areas. And also we have to talk about the heritage economics, the financial support for conservation. There are various ways of doing that. It also can generate fund that are very important to take care of that when you are talking about the historic areas. Importance of promoting methods, techniques and skills for restoration and rehabilitation. What will be the use, adaptive use not only of one structure, but in certain area. There may be an old port area or old warehouses. What will be the new role or new activities of that in the larger context of that town or the city, and that needs a very objective assessment, scientific techniques of finding out the attributes, the possibility, different methods and skills, that is very important. And what is important is that then these are so specialized things. There is a more than this specialized, it needs a new approach to look at the old area, that it is not only a museum city, it is a living city. So, it needs an exchange of knowledge, experience, training and a capacity building and training program. So, even the architects also knows, or the construction people or the structural engineers know that when we are looking into such structures, all the convenience facilities have to be provided, but it needs probably a different approach of looking that, which we can't, probably it will be different from the new areas. Promotion of an interest in conservation among young people as a prospective discipline, because it is not only the expertise, that how we involve the younger generation in the everyday life, creating awareness and the educational program, heritage walks, making the people appreciate and foster an appreciation, and this started happening in the architectural heritage of the Europe, when we are talking about these historic areas and cities declaration. It followed 1976. We had the Nairobi, where UNESCO adopts international recommendation concerning safeguarding and contemporary role of the historic cities. You see, again and again I am saying safeguarding and contemporary role of the historic areas. So, let us see what are the principles. It says every historic area and its surroundings should be considered in their totality as a coherent whole, whose balance and specific nature depend on the fusion of the parts of which is composed, and which include human activities as much as the building, the spatial organization and the surroundings. All valid elements, including human activities, however modest, thus have a significance in relation to the whole, which must not be disregarded. So, let us see what is talking about. It is talking about a coherent whole. It is also talking about a fusion of parts. So, even in that whole there can be parts, because it has a layers of history. There are different parts, or even in one part there are the buildings of different period. The spatial organization, the road layout, the open spaces, water bodies, the gardens and the surrounding, that what is the setting of this historic areas, all are there, but also important is the human activities, past activities, present activities, redefinition of the activity and in relation to the whole. That means, it should have a relationship of a larger region or the larger city, that is given in the article 3 of this Nairobi 1976 declaration. So, as I say, the in relation to the whole is very important. So, it is a parts also important, but it is a holistic integrated approach. So, that takes us, gives us some idea about the concept of the integrated urban conservation, how it developed, and the focus shifted from the individual monument centric to the concept of the historic area and the setting, where monuments and its surrounding area, or groups of buildings or group of structure and open spaces, or the rural areas, the village structure, which is of a significant characteristic, they all became important and they were included in the various charters and conventions. In our next lecture, we will continue with this, and we will talk in more detail about some of the specific example of that, how these issues of the historic areas have been addressed. Thank you.